Hello, I recently wrote my thesis, and at the end of it I had way too much formatting and reference work, pretty much because of my poor management in the beginning. So what I want to do in this video is walk through pretty much setting up your Word document and how to manage your EndNote library. So what we first want to talk about is making a Word template. And this is going to pretty much define your margins, and in that we're also going to define our headings, which are going to be our chapter numbers, our subheadings, and we're going to then talk a little bit about how we want to initialize our EndNote libraries and how we want to manage them, because this document is going to be so big that Word is going to be extremely slow and clunky. What you want to do is section all of these into individual chapters, and this will also make it so that you can do an EndNote library at the end of each chapter. So what we're going to do is then take each individual one and compile it into a total document, and in there generate the table of contents. So what we want to do first is do our margins, and theses generally have fairly strict margin requirements. So we're just going to do 1 inch all around for right now. And what I want to do is just drop in a basic framework for a thesis. So we have our beginning stuff, our abstract and our lists, and then we have our first chapter being the introduction and its references. And then we have the second chapter, we'll just call it example, and 2 sublevels within that example with its own references. So what we want to do first is define our headers. So first of all, we're going to talk about that at the end, so let's just get rid of it. So let's first define our chapter heading. So we're going to call that heading 1, and we can right click on that and go into modify. We'll do black for all of the headings, and we'll do Calibri light just so I don't have to change it every time. So you can change the font right here, and you can also go in and change how the paragraph is. And for here, I think this looks pretty good with 0 before and 56 after. We'll do no indentation for right now. And there, so now we just have the formatting of the heading. So for the references, we'll have that be heading 2, and that's also going to be sublevel 1. And do these. And actually we will change the paragraph a little bit just so that it has good spacing. And now we're going to do example. So this is our chapter 2, and then we can assign sublevel 2 or sublevel 1 to heading 2, and then sublevel 2 heading 3, and modify that. This is all kind of redundant, so it sounds like I'm being redundant because I am. But this is essentially what you have to do to set it up. And I didn't change the others to single. Those should all be single. Okay. All right. There we go. So we now have all of our headings set up, and this is going to be heading 2. So now kind of the tricky part. We need to create a list for these different levels. So what we want to do is go into this drop-down menu and define a new multi-level list. So I already have it populated right here, but what I'm going to do is just walk you through it. So this is our list level. So the top level is our chapters, so chapter 1. So this is what it looks like to begin with. So you just modify it to be in that way, and then you go down to the next one, and you'll notice that that one is like this, or it actually is probably like that. So you go in, and now what you have to do is you need to include the level from level 1. So that's now chapter 1 subsection 1. Now go into the next one, and it's much the same. So make sure it's on 1, and then add it from level 1 and then add it from level 2. Make sure you do it in the correct order because it does matter. And we can go, okay, so that just defined that. We don't want to do that. So now what we need to do is tell these that these are all part of that numbering system. So introduction is now chapter 1. References, it comes up as chapter 2, but all we need to do here is change the list level. And what I find is you need to do a space and a tab. If you do just a tab, it wants to increment the list. So space tab. And then we want to tell this is the next level. It actually did it correctly that time. It hadn't been doing it correctly the other times, but it didn't do it there. So just again, change the list level. So that'll automatically put it in the chapter 2. And we can change the list level now here. And add it here. So now we have the overall framework of our list levels. From here, we can actually save this as a template and work off of it in the future. So I already have it saved as template 1 right there. So when I start to work on my first chapter, when I start to work on the introduction, what I'm going to do now is open up template 1 and just delete here, and here is the beginning of chapter 1. And then I'll save that as not a Word template, but just a Word document, and I'll call it chapter 1. And from here, what we want to do is now talk about how we're going to format our EndNote libraries. The first thing that you want to do is open up EndNote, and we're going to create new reference libraries for each chapter. So I'm going to create one library called chapter 1, and what I'm going to do is just put in an arbitrary reference. So I'm going to go right click and go new reference, and I'm just going to put my name, and this will be for YouTube. So this is just going to be simple for right now, but what you will notice is that there are a lot of fields. So one of the tricky parts to making EndNote look nice in your thesis is to have all of these fields be properly populated. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but so we want to save our reference. So now we have one reference. Actually, what I'm going to do is call this chapter 1, reference 1. We'll do that. So say I now want to go and put this reference in here. So I can go to my EndNote tab, insert citation, and I want to insert that reference right there. So now we have a reference inserted in, but things are not set up exactly how they should be. So what we want to do now is go into our EndNote and go to Edit, Output Styles, and we're essentially going to tell what style we want this library to be formatted in. So what I made a new one based off of the science type, but what I'm going to do is just edit the science style. So now what I'm going to do is go into sections, and you want to create a bibliography for each section. And also while you're here, you can look at the templates for your bibliography. So like I said, there are those lots of fields that can be input into each reference. here is where it tells you how that reference is going to be displayed on your document. So for thesis, you need to make sure that thesis type is input, and you need to make sure that university, place that it's published. So these are what tell you what is going to show up on your document. So you can go in here. The syntax is a little tough to understand, but it just has basic controls, and it's definitely worthwhile going into there. So we want to save our science, and we're going to save it as science YouTube. And now we can close out of here. And what we want to do is go in here and select our format. And it's going to update the bibliography. And now that style will be applied to this document. So this also is not completely right, is it? So we don't have a references section. So we can go in, add our references section, give it the proper heading, give it the proper list style, and the proper list level. Whole bunch of different names for these things. And then what we can do is go in and insert a page break. So now we have our body of the chapter 1 and our references section. So now what we're going to do, so I'm going to save this. This is our chapter 1 now. That's right. It's going to scream at me because you'll see how awesome Word can be sometimes. So now I'm going to open up my template 1 again, but this time I'm going, oops, I can actually leave those in place and just go and change what value this starts at. I'm going to call it that, and then so now we can type the beginning paragraph, and then we can go in and have the text for sublevel 1. And now what I need to do is create an EndNote library for chapter 2. So I'm going to go File, New, EndNote libs. So there's my chapter 1, now chapter 2. And I'm going to make a new reference with me. And chapter 2, reference 1. YouTube. And right off the bat, I'm going to go in and make sure that it is the correct output style. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to insert that citation, chapter 2, reference 2. And so this is now in references, and we can, I'm going to insert a page break later, but another useful tool to use is the edit and manage citations function. And this tells you your list of citations, which kind of looks a little funky, but when it's all populated, but it also lets you look at where each library is located. So this one is in chapter 2, which it should be. So that's good. So now what we're going to do is go and save this as our chapter 2. And there we go. So we have chapter 2 down in there. And what we're going to do now is open up our template. And now we're going to basically be compiling our document overall. So what we want to do is put in a placeholder for our title page, and we're going to insert a page break, and we're going to have our table of contents here, and we're going to insert another page break. And here we're going to have our first chapter. So what we need to do here is insert a section break so that our endnote behaves properly. So we're going to insert one, so I'll zoom out so we can see. So we're on the next page, but we want to then insert another page. So I like having a blank page between each section. I found that that works very well. So now what I want to do now is insert my chapter 1. So I go insert object or text from file, and we insert chapter 1. And that populates chapter 1. So we have, excuse me, our references section and the body of the chapter. And then what I want to do again is do my 2 page breaks. And I want to go and insert. So, okay, I will say right now that when you have multiple of these documents open at the same time, what you want to be wary of is what EndNote library you have open. Because if you have all of your EndNote libraries open at the same time and this thing syncs, it can screw things up royally. And what you also want to do is turn instant formatting off. So you want to have control over when that thing updates, because it can screw things up pretty well. Having it in sections like this makes it doable, but it does not make it foolproof. You still need to be careful of how you do this. And you really want to save this compilation step until all the edits are done, everything is done. So before I go to insert chapter 2, I want to make sure instant formatting is off, and I want to make sure all my EndNote libraries are closed. EndNote can be open, just not all of the libraries. They'll try to reform links with each other. So, okay, anyway, insert chapter 2, and you'll notice that I don't have the correct page breaks and stuff in here, so I'll just go ahead and insert 1 page break so that that's correct. And also, okay. So now what I want to do is insert my table of contents. So I go into References, Table of Contents, Insert Table of Contents, and you can choose a different template. I kind of like the formal. It ends up looking like this. So now we have our title page. You'll notice that this dropped in that text. You can format it so that it treats that properly, or just create a section right there. So there's our table of contents. We can drop it down and just give it a name. And what we can also do here, say we want, so right now title page is currently on that. Say we want to have table of contents on there as well. What we can do is give it heading 1. This should also actually be heading 1. And then what we can do is go and click on the table of contents, and we can go right, update table, and we want to update the entire table. And you'll notice that now that is the proper heading, and we have our table of contents. But this numbering isn't proper, because this should be, or title page really shouldn't even have a number, but for right now I'm going to give it a number. So I'm going to insert page numbers to the bottom right of the page, and what I want to do, what you'll notice, or it's not doing it right now, but what I want to do is change the formatting here. So I can go page number, format page numbers, change it into the eyes. What's interesting is when I go down, these are numbers. So introduction is page 1. I mean page 4, not IV. So what we need to do here, that is because of the section breaks that are in place. So be aware that it does do that for section breaks. So we want to start that at 1, and we want to remove this footer. Will that work? No, you need to kind of play with it sometimes, but that page number needs to be deleted. So now we can go back and update our table. We can just update the entire table, and you'll now notice that it has I and II. So that is basically how to compile the document and to have all of the EndNote libraries talk well. So as a proof of concept, this is risky, but if I go to EndNote and update citations and bibliography, you'll see I have chapter 1 reference is still chapter 1, and chapter 2 reference is still chapter 2. So they did not interpose or anything, and even when it gets more complicated, the way that I described it should keep things acting proper. So I hope this video was beneficial. If you have, this was what I did to make it work. I'm not saying that this is the correct way or the easiest way, but this is what hours of research led me to do. So if you have any better suggestions, leave comments, or if you enjoy this video, leave a comment. Thanks for watching.